Item B, please, City Clerk.
Item 6B, waive first reading, introduce the 2019 Fire and Building Code ordinances to be adopted by reference, schedule public hearing for adoption, and adopt resolution approving findings of necessity and need for amendments, deletions, and additions to the San Bruno Municipal Code.
Director Smith.
Hi, good evening. I'm back. Good evening again, Honorable Mayor and Council members. So hold on, let me get the PowerPoint ready. I'll be making the presentation tonight, even though this also includes the fire code. The chief, Ari DeLay, has been kind of busy fighting real fires, so I get to make the presentation. So the agenda for my presentation will start with the definition for the objective of this item, and then I'll provide the background and a more detailed overview of the ordinances and the resolution. And I'll highlight the action before council tonight, and we can end with questions. So the objective for this item is to waive the first reading and introduce the 2019 Fire and Building Code ordinances that would be adopted by reference, schedule a public hearing for adoption, which would be at the next regular city council meeting, and adopt the resolution approving findings of necessity and need for the amendments, deletions, and additions to the San Bruno Municipal Codes. And while I get to make this presentation, I want to emphasize that a large number of city staff work collaboratively as part of a special projects team to develop the staff report and the 47 pages of ordinances in the resolution. And if there's technical questions about the codes tonight, then they might be best answered by Roy Bernald, our chief building official, who's been waiting patiently in the wings, and Gage Schleiss, fire marshal, who'd like to come back and speak some more before you if you have any technical questions. And we also have assistance from Mark Safran, the city attorney, as needed. And again, since this was such a large item, we also had assistance with the report preparation by members of our planning staff. So I'll cover some relevant background now, only because I know you're probably wondering, what are these building and fire codes? So the State of California Building Standards Commission, which is a pretty strong and robust commission, adopts these state building codes, and that also includes the fire code. They do those every 3 years generally, and this comprises what's legally called Title 24 of the California Code of Regulations. And sometimes the commission adopts mid-cycle adjustments, but I think when you see the code, you'll understand why. They typically do these every 3 years. So what are these codes? They set design and construction standards for new construction, as well as new occupancy. So that's when a building changes the type of use throughout the entire state. They address requirements for structural, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical systems, and for fire and life safety. But they've also expanded, and I'll touch on some of those items later, around energy conservation, green or sustainable design, and accessibility, ADA access in and around buildings. Commonly, these are referred to as the 2019 California Building Codes, but again, they encompass the fire codes, and they're automatically going to effect January 1st. And as I'll go into more detail later, cities may adopt local amendments that are more restrictive as reasonably necessary because of local climatic, geological, or topographical conditions. And we certainly have those in San Bruno. We have very interesting microclimates with a lot of wind and fog. We have geological conditions. We're right near San Andreas Fault, where we have properties in a fault zone, a special fault zone determined by the state. And we have a lot of very topographical conditions. We are absolutely not flat. And so when we look at these state codes, we sometimes need to modify them to suit our local needs, and the state allows us to do that. So what are these codes? I just want to pause for a minute, and you probably think, well, why can't we just do these locally? Well, these are very voluminous codes. They are shown here. They take up more than one entire cabinet sometimes, and if you walk around the building division ever, you'll see them floating around. They might put you to sleep at this hour. But they're ginormous. And for example, our local municipal code, if you've ever seen a printed copy, such as around City Hall, usually it's 2 volumes, double-sided. So this here is 11 binders. And I just wanted to emphasize, this is why they're done at a state level and adopted locally. Because locally, we would not want to prepare all 11 binders. and maintain them. And if any of you are really curious to see these ever, because they can be interesting to read, we have copies in the building division, but you can also now read them online. And this is a terribly formatted slide, so please don't, it's not meant to be read, but I just want to emphasize this is the breadth and volume of what these codes include. And I mentioned that some of the topics, but there's also other topics this addresses, like historical codes and other really detailed aspects. And again, all of these parts are contained in those big voluminous binders. This is just another example of, well, what is that code? What is that code? It's really a legally complex document. It's written by very experienced and highly trained engineers, architects, attorneys, other building fire code experts, again, at the state level. And they really are the best of the best. And I would say in California, we are really at the forefront around a lot of issues around especially energy conservation and fire safety and building safety, and also seismic safety. So these are honestly some of the most state-of-the-art building codes in the entire world. That's why they're so voluminous and so technically detailed. But again, if you just read a little bit of it, it's a very complex legal code. So what really changed? Well, again, we can always get better when we write these codes. And while some of it was code language restatements, minor refinements, such as we do with our local codes, if we find they aren't quite working right, just as we talked about with the short-term residential rental ordinance. Some changes really in the state are leading the charge for photovoltaic systems, energy conservation, which, as we noticed recently with the rolling power outages, the state doesn't always have the energy supply to meet demand. And that's true. And new construction, building construction, is a huge source of demand for energy. And so the state really sets extremely aggressive requirements around energy utilization for new construction. Also, the state is promoting other sustainable items such as electric vehicle chargers that you see here. So other changes, again, around increasing door and window performance. Performance means sort of, that ability of the door and window to ensure there's no leakage of air quality. And if anyone sort of pits their doors and windows to the test around the latest issue around smoke, you realize you can have all your doors and windows shut and somehow the smoke still gets in, and mystifying me. But the latest requirements around performance really ensure that those windows and doors are airtight, but that's an energy feature. And then demand response controls, again, energy efficiency to manage mechanical lighting systems, which you see here. Other things that we've really evolved around are building safety. Unfortunately, in this era, educational occupancies such as schools need the ability to lock doors to keep out intruders, and that's actually in the building code. So again, it doesn't just encompass sort of basic building stuff, it really addresses building safety. And last, the new codes have expanded requirements for wildland urban interfaces, which again are very timely. So what do we do at the local level? Well, we're required by law to enforce these codes. They apply no matter what. And all San Bruno projects requiring building permits submitted on or after January 1st of this year required to comply with them. So they've been applied successfully since that time with no major issues. Again, our staff have reached out to the community, updated the website. Our staff's attended a lot of training. And usually these codes sort of, again, because at the state level, our local architects, our local designers, local contractors are aware of them and trained. And that's a good thing. So we've been applying them successfully with not a lot of issues to date. So I'll cover the resolution and ordinances that are before you tonight. So again, the ordinances before you amend our local code, which is Title 11. That title is called Building Constructions and Fire Protection. And that's exactly what it does. It relates to buildings and fire protection. But what I want to pause here and emphasize is that you're not wiping out that entire title. There's other chapters in there, such as the floodplain ordinance, which you adopted last year, that remain as is. This literally just deals with what codes we apply when we issue permits and the fire provisions, and includes these local amendments. But I just want to emphasize you're only editing certain chapters, and that's reflected in each of those ordinances that are before you tonight. And another key thing that we accomplished through this local adoption is ease of local implementation and the ability of the city to enforce the methods and processes contained within the municipal code. You are aware of some of those, the appeals process, the ability of the city to issue citations and otherwise take code violations through a municipal process. Those are kept in place and very important to the city. So we do have local amendments before you tonight, and that's what I wanted to spend the bulk of the time on, because the state codes are the state codes and they're in effect, and all we need to do, if you looked at the ordinances, is literally change 2016 to 2019. So that's very simple. It's unfortunate that we have to do that because it is a lot of work, but we do. But I just want to pause on the local amendments because we do have, as I mentioned previously, local climatic, geographical, and topographical conditions. That's pretty obvious here. And in 2016, the City Council approved a number of local amendments, and we are merely proposing those for readoption tonight with one minor change I want to touch on. But those local amendments, I want to emphasize, are in line with what other jurisdictions in the county have adopted. So our building official, Roy Bernald, speaks to other building officials at the entire county. Our fire marshal, Gage Schleiss, talks to other fire marshals and fire districts, and it's all coordinated. And that really helps local contractors and design professionals to have that consistency. So we aren't doing anything dramatically different. And I'll step through an example of that. So these tiny little diamond signs that are colored, seen them many times, that, wonder what those are. Well, they're actually very important. They identify hazardous materials, and they're really helpful if our emergency responders ever go out because of a fire or a leak or whatnot, because frankly, our emergency responders could be at risk if they apply water to these things or have different strategies for handling them. So the state code conveniently doesn't set a specific sign requirements. They said, well, let the city decide. And our fire marshal, rather than answering the phone all day long, answering questions, he'd rather just set a requirement in the code. And that's, again, what other fire marshals have done locally. This doesn't cause an unreasonable hardship. These little signs are about $12 or $30 readily available, but it just ensures that we have signs of a reasonable size, I think it's 15 inches by 15 inches, to assist our emergency responders to do their job. And if we didn't set the 15 by 15 inches, it would be up to us to decide case by case basis, and then it just could cause some issues. So another example of a local amendment, which we already have in place, is around address illumination. So why would that be important here? Well, we have fog, and we also have steep streets. So what our local code requires is exactly what you see here. It's that we require new construction with address signs to have illuminated address numbers, and more importantly, to receive their primary powering from building wiring. And what that means is you don't just put a little battery pack in there and, oh my gosh, the batteries go bad. And guess what? The illumination doesn't work. And then you have an emergency and the first responders come out and they can't find your address. And if the fog's heavy and you're on a slope, could cause a delay in emergency response. And that's an example of why kind of locally we may need a different standard than, somewhere else that has no fog and is 100% flat, and you could see very clearly. So that's an example of why, again, through very deliberate analysis, beginning years ago, we set some local amendments in place. And again, these are in line with certain other communities that have fog, that have steep slopes. Other things that we do unique in San Bruno, but other jurisdictions near us do, are to ensure the protection of residential structures from airport noise impacts through specifications for windows. And then locally, to ensure that we have the specifications related to the building official's role to administer the codes, related to appeals and other penalties, which again are cross-referenced in our municipal code, Chapter 1.28. And then fire, we have, as we've seen, high wind, fire risk here. So again, starting back in 2016, the city set different requirements for construction because of our fire risk. And I want to emphasize, we put these in place and applied them for many years. And our response from the building community is that these don't cause an unreasonable financial hardship to property owners or developers. And in fact, in looking at what other cities have done, there are cities on the peninsula that have pages and pages and pages of local amendments that could, in fact, cause that. And I think we've taken a very moderate and reasonable stance here tonight. So the last item before you, in addition to those long ordinances, is a resolution, which is a very special finding of need resolution that needs to be filed with the state in order for those local amendments to be effective. And again, we've just documented the unique conditions here in San Bruno that we think warrant these. And in conclusion, the action before you tonight is to introduce the 2019 Fire and Building Code ordinances to be adopted by reference, schedule the public hearing for adoption, which is the next regular meeting if these move forward, and adopt the resolution approving the findings of necessity and need for the amendments, deletions, and additions to the San Bruno Municipal Code. And if you take this recommended action tonight, as I mentioned, the public hearing would be scheduled. That's a requirement because these are codes adopted by reference. The ordinances would be effective 30 days after adoption, and we would then file those with the state. So that concludes my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions along with our building official, fire marshal, and fire chief who are here tonight to assist in this item.
Okay. Any questions from colleagues? None. Okay, thank you. No, I'm seeing no. And so I'm seeing none at this time. Okay, with that said, what I would need is to, if the action from council, and do we have anybody from, I'm seeing nobody from the community. Check. No, okay. So I would need a motion and a second to waive the first reading.
Make a motion to waive the first reading.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to waive the first reading. Roll call, please. Or
Councilmember
wait, can I just do a, do we have to have a roll call or can we just do a motion?
No, you can do a voice vote if you would like.
Sure. Okay, folks, on waiving the first reading, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? I'm hearing 5-0 voice to waive the first reading. My understanding is we can take all of these at once. So with permission, if I'll read this and hopefully this will expedite it. One motion will introduce all the ordinances, okay, since there are no changes. We're going to schedule, so we're going to introduce all the ordinances and we're going to schedule a public hearing for adoption on 9/8/2020 and adopt the resolution approving the findings of necessity. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Mason? Aye. Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.